Prepare to experience a power like no other!
Come on, Heart of the Cards!
To summon the almighty
Tindangle Hound. Kia ora koutou. I am the Casual Kiwi, and this is my take on Tindangle OTK. Now, please do tell me in the comments what you think of this build, because I went through a lot of prototypes before getting to this version of the deck. I was trying it out with evil heroes, I was trying it out with Shadows and dinosaurs, I was trying it out with Infernoids, until eventually I decided to cut all of that out and focus on a slender 40 card version of the deck which commits to the OTK. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the profile. So to begin with, we're playing as our boss monster of the deck 3 copies of Tindangle Hound. This is a level 7 with 2500 attack, and the effect that matters most to us here is that while Tindangle Hound is on the field, your opponent's monsters lose 1000 attack for every monster linked to them. This is the card we're going into most often because it's the Tindangle with the highest base attack, and the main way we'll be getting there is through Monster Gate or Reasoning. We're not focusing on the flip effects, we're focusing on that battle effect, and this is what makes this deck special and makes it tick. So then in addition to Hound, we're also playing 1 copy of Tindangle Intruder. The main thing here is that it's a level 6 instead of a level 7, meaning even if your opponent does call 7 off a Reasoning, for example, they might hit this. We also don't mind playing an extra Tindangle here because with Nagel's protection, you can discard a Tindangle in order to search it, which means that if you draw one of these in your opening hand, it's not the biggest deal in the world. Again, it's just another option to go into, and that is it for the Tindangle lineup. The only other normal summon we play in the deck is 1 copy of Psyframe Driver. So it's a level 6 like Intruder, and we do play Celestial Observatory in this deck because we do play a few level 6s. But ideally you're wanting to use this so that you can utilize the Psyframe gear package and possibly get a really powerful Synchro on board, which can make your life a lot easier. So that's just the last normal summon of the deck. So to complement our driver, we play 3 Psyframe Gear Gamma. This is a wonderful, wonderful hand trap that I think is thoroughly underrated because it's not once per turn. It can hit a lot of cards that things like Call by the Grave can't, for example, like Nibiru or like Phantasme. It also is not... Also, because it's not once per turn, it means that even if this does get ashed, for example, that if your opponent in some other way does something, because this won't have been destroyed, you can activate it again and still get out a negate. So you get a lot of utility out of it. And again, it also helps us get that driver out of the deck. So to make sure that we're always seeing a Psyframe gear, we also play Delta, which allows us to hit our opponent's spells, and because counter traps are becoming more prevalent, I do prefer Delta over Epsilon, for example, which hits traps, but that really is down to personal preference. And again, you want to make this deck as consistent as possible. You always want to have some sort of interruption, you always want to be able to turbo out a Tindangle, and this helps you get there. So that's it for the Psyframe package. We then run 3 copies of Volcano Queen, and not just for the volcanic support memes, but because this is actually a lot harder for some of the meta decks to play around, especially if you're up against something like Sky Striker that finishes on only 1 monster. Then something like Lava Golem is not going to cut it, and it's going to end up being a brick. So Volcanic Queen is a better option for that reason, because you only need to tribute one of your opponent's monsters. But like Lava Golem, it cannot be normal summoned or set. So like the Psyframe gears as well, if you're milling these cards off of Reasoning or off of Monster Gate, they won't trigger it, they won't get special summoned, which means that you'll still hit your Tindangles. There is some downsides to playing this over Lava Golem. Whereas Lava Golem burns at the beginning of their turn, this burns in the end phase, and they can negate that 1000 damage by sending one of their cards to the graveyard. They can also actively send a card to the graveyard earlier in order to burn you for 1000 damage, which can be a bit rough. But again, ideally, you're finishing them off before it gets to that point. And even if it does, they are removing resources from their field in order to keep this on board. So I do like playing the 3 Volcanic Queen. We then play 1 copy of Wolf, Lightsworn Beast. He's just a great kind of extra body that you can get on board, but he is a bit of a garnet, so that's why we only run him at 1. That's why he's in there. We then play, same as in my Trickstar Cup of Ace deck, we also play 3 copies of Eater of Millions. This is just a really fantastic card that we don't have to normal summon, cannot be normal summoned or set, and it has a fairly easy summoning condition because we don't go into our extra deck all that often of being able to banish 5 cards face down from our extra deck in order to summon it out. And though it can't be tributed, what you can do with this is go into Link Karibo, and then that can be tributed off, so you can still use it for Monster Gate plays. Then we also run Instant Fusion, which is like our 4th copy of Eater of Millions because it plays a similar purpose, so that's really handy to have. Then we also play Emergency Teleport and Monster Reborn. Again, this is a way of getting a body on board without normal summoning or setting, which will make more sense when we get to Hidden Armoury, which we do play in this deck. So Emergency Teleport allows us to turbo out our Gammas or our Delta in order to get a body on board, and gives us a little bit of extra utility once we've used up our interaction, our drive of play, to still make use of those Psyframes still in our deck. And Monster Reborn just helps us, get to a body from either field. It's Monster Reborn, there's not too much to explain there. For the last of our Tindangle support, we do play 3 copies of Nagel's Protection. This is really what gave me the idea for the deck. Unfortunately, it can't be sent to the graveyard off Intruder because it is not technically a Tindangle card, which is a bit disappointing. But the key things about this card is that Tindangle monsters in your main monster zones cannot be destroyed by battle or your opponent's card effects. Again, we don't use the Link Acute Cerberus, so all of our Tindangles are protected by this for destruction, which can be very useful. Also, once per turn, battle damage inflicted by one of your Tindangles is doubled. Again, incredibly powerful when combined with Hound's ability to make your opponent's monsters small and then beat over them for massive damage. And this is searchable, of course, by discarding a Tindangle. It can really make sure that you get 8k plus damage on board. We then play 1 copy of Reasoning and 4 copies of Monster Gate. This is our best way to get Tindangle Hound on the board, hands down. Reasoning is your ideal play, but if you've got to use Monster Gate, then we have a number of ways, as I've shown, to get a monster on the board. And we'll also be playing, give me a second. one copy of Leer of Darkness, which means that even if we don't have a monster on board that we contribute, then this copy of Leer can be used to allow us to tribute off our opponent's monsters with Monster Gate to get that Tindangle on board. Now the thing to remember here with Leer of Darkness is that even if you don't have Monster Gate on board, it can be quite useful. We do play Mage Power in this deck, and that will boost it up by having a card in the field zone. It's also a great way to base out an opponent's negate, because if they see Leer of Darkness come down, they immediately think, okay, he's going to be tributing off our monsters. So they will want to activate something to negate this. If they go into Twin Twister or they use one of the negates of their monsters, then you might be able to trigger one of your Psy-frames, and then you've got a Synchro on board, which can just make your plays all the more powerful. So it's a really great way to bait out your opponent, and I'm definitely glad to at least run it one copy in the deck. We then play 3 copies of Hidden Armoury. So you might not be too familiar with this card, but basically you send the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and then you can add one equip spell from your deck or graveyard to your hand, but you cannot normal summon / set the turn that you activate this card. So there's again one of the reasons we don't run a lot of normal summons at all in this deck. Not once per turn, so you can activate multiples of these to get multiple equips to your hand. It allows you to add from the graveyard, so even if you've milled all of your equips, then you can still add them to your hand. It just provides so many options and so much consistency to the deck, which you really need in this, because you do have to commit to that going second strategy. But I will be looking at the side deck to show what happens if you do have to go first. So then for the equips we play in the deck, again because they're searchable with Hidden Armoury, we only play the 4, which is 1 copy of Psychic Blade and 3 copies of Mage Power. So for Psychic Blade, you pay life points in multiples of 100 up to 2,000, and then the card it's equipped to gains that amount of attack. So you can boost your Tindangle Hound by 2,000 to bring him up to 4,500, and if you attack directly or with a 0 attack monster while Nagel's protection is on board, that's 9,000 damage. It's huge. But in addition to that, we also have the Mage Power, which allows the equipped monster to gain 500 attack and defense for each spell and trap card you control, which includes the field spell zone, of course, there. So you're able to boost by quite a large amount depending on how many you've got, and this stacks as well. So if you've got 3 copies of Mage Power on board, they'll all be boosting. I've seen even like just a Psy-frame gear get to 9,000 attack just off these cards alone. So it just adds to the consistency. Obviously you need to have a few cards in order to guarantee that OTK. So we do play a few different draw spells to turbo out those plays. So first we play 1 copy of Celestial Observatory. This allows us to place 1 level 6 monster from the hand on the bottom of the deck and then draw 2 cards. It's only once per turn, so we only play the 1. You can use this to take your driver and put on the bottom of the deck. You can also put Intruder on the bottom, or one of your Volcano Queens if your opponent doesn't have something you contribute with it. The next one we play is Pot of Desire. I went back and forth on So unlike other Tindangle variants, you don't go into the extra deck very often. to go into acute Cerberus plays or anything like that. But we do have a few options for things we can go into. So first off, we'll go through the synchro options for our psi frames. So obviously there's psi frame Lord Omega. Probably when you'll be bringing this out is if, again, you are forced to go first. You bring out psi frame gear, you steal one of their cards and take this to the banish zone. And then on your turn, when you're ready to go off into your OTK plays, it's back. You can use it for your monster gate. Next we play one Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. I think definitely don't sleep on this card. It is a generic level 8. You don't have to play any worms, you don't have to play any other Tenyis. And it's almost like a more generic Crystal Wing because you don't need a synchro for it. So when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can banish that monster. Also, it gains attack equal to a destroys monster's original attack after it's done battle with it, and then it can make a second attack on a monster. We then play one copy of Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend. You probably won't go into this as commonly as Berserker of the Tenyi, but essentially the big thing here is that it can destroy all special summon monsters on your opponent's field with its same attack or less. So it's really good when your opponent is playing some deck that spams out a lot of monsters, and then you're able to just destroy them all and inflict damage equal to their inflict 500 damage for each one. So you're lowering their overall life points there, and you're also able to clear out possibly some of their more defensive play. Finally, for the level 8 package, we play Vylon Epsilon. I really just think this card looks beautiful, great to have it in the deck. Basically what it does is that equip spells attached to it can't be destroyed with your opponent's card effects. And once per turn you can send one equipped card equipped to this card to the graveyard to target one monster your opponent controls and destroy that target. Now remember, we do play Hidden Armoury, so we can also, once that equip has been destroyed, add it back to our hand and re-equip it. In addition to the level 8 synchros, you can make some level 7 plays under rather specific circumstances. Basically, if you have instant fusion and you have your emergency teleport on board, then you can go into some level 7 plays. And so we do play the Vylon Sigma, which is really cool because when it attacks, it can equip one equip spell from the deck to it, which means that you can basically just get an extra equip that you didn't have otherwise when you're attacking with this. And then you also play one copy of Cyburst Quantum Dragon. So kind of like how Eater of Millions banishes a card when it's attacked or is attacked, Cyburst Quantum Dragon can do a similar thing, except then it's allowed a second attack that turn. So that's it for the Synchro package. For the links, we play one copy of Unicorn and one copy of Phoenix. In addition to those, we could play Cerberus, but I am playing one Beat Cop from the Underworld. Again, you have a lot of other options to get rid of opponents' monsters without having to rely on destruction, which is always good because a lot of cards in Yu-Gi-Oh!, even rogue decks, have protection from destruction. Our own Tindangles are a testament to that. This works really well with Leer of Darkness to allow you to tribute over your opponent's monsters in order to put a security counter on something, and then instead of that being destroyed, you can remove a security counter. So you can use this to tribute over an opponent's monster and then protect your Nagel's protection or protect the Leer or something like that. And I consider this a Leer of Darkness card, honestly, because I think that's where its home is. It's played very generically though, and it is at home here as well. In addition to these, we do play one Link Karibo, and what's not too common is one Secure Gardener. Now, Link Karibo is the standard play if you want to tribute over an Eater of Millions to get in a monster to get to your Hound. you won't be able to do it. You've got to go into something like Link Karibo first, and that's why this is here. If you want to, though, what you can do is after Link Karibo, for example, if you've got Reasoning in hand, you might not need to use a Monster Gate. You can go into Secure Gardener, and as well as protecting you from Mystic Mind decks to an extent, once it's summoned, you can't take effect damage for that turn. It also points, you can have it positioned so that it points your opponent's extra monster zone. So that's it for the links. We'll go into the fusions. So we do play Super Poly in the side, so that's why Starving Venom Fusion Dragon is here. But we also have Diplexer Chimera. This is fantastic for this strategy because it can tribute itself in order to prevent any spells or traps activating during the battle phase, which can really help you win games. And also it does require 2 Cyburst monsters if you don't make it off instant fusion, which can be very useful if you are playing Super Poly and you're up against Ignisters, or you're up against Pure Cyburst, or if you're up against Salads. I always think that a deck should be able to take on the meta, and I wouldn't so much categorize Tindangle OTK as rogue as I would as anti-meta. It does best when it's against decks that use a lot of links, which spam out, which try and build these unbreakable boards. We then also play 1 copy of Thousand Eyes Restrict and 1 copy of Millennium's Eyes Restrict. If you cannot afford Millennium Eyes, totally understand it. I was very lucky to pull that card. But Millennium Eyes Restrict can also be really handy because it basically acts as another negate. It allows you to prevent yourself from getting ashed, for example, if you're trying to search stuff out with Hidden Armoury or popping up with your draw spells. So key thing there is that this can stop ash. This can stop Ghost Ogre, this can stop Effect Veiler. A lot of early Crusadia builds, which focus more on Equimax and the OTK, play Millennium Eyes Restrict for exactly the same reason we do here. Really handy to have. And that's it for the extra deck lineup. So as you've probably noticed, this strategy has to commit to the Go Second OTK to really operate and really make the most of those Tindangle cards. Which is why you've got to think about side decking, because your opponent is going to catch on and they're going to force you to go first. And as this is that Go Second variant, you're sacrificing that ability to easily go first. So what are you going to side deck in order to deal with that? So what I side deck is 3 copies of Archlord Christia. So when you're forced to go first, what you do is you take out your Tindangle Hounds, you replace them with Christia, and when this card is on the board, your opponent just can't special summon. If this is game 2, game 3, they've seen probably that you're playing Tindangle Hound, you're playing Reasoning. If you go for a Reasoning play, they're probably going to call 7 or perhaps 6, and that could possibly trip you up big time. But if you've sided into Christias, they're not going to be calling 8, and you're going to get this on board turn 1, and they're going to have a hell of a time trying to play through that. We then play 3 copies of Left Arm Offering, therefore, to go with that. So you side this in alongside Christia so that you can turbo out Reasoning, because they're going to make the wrong call if you're swapped out for the Christias, which are level 8. Left Arm Offering is something we could play in the main. When I was playing the 60 card version, I gave it a go. The problem here, though, is that because we rely so much on boosting up what we get out over through Reasoning, through Monster Gate, Left Arm Offering, by having to banish your entire hand in order to add a spell to hand, means that it won't often get you the play that you want when you're running the Tindangle package. But with this kind of a smokescreen side, you don't have to worry about that. That's kind of our mini smokescreen for going first. The other big issue you might have is decks that just put far too many negates on board, and so that's why we're playing 3 copies of Super Polymerization. The other thing that this deck can struggle with is back row, so we play 3 Cosmic Cyclone, and 3 copies of Red Reboot. So that's it for the side deck. I really hope you've enjoyed my profile of Tindangle OTK. This deck has been a long slog to get to this point, but I am so happy to be able to share it with you. It's taken a lot out of me, but we made it. We got there, folks. Tindangle OTK is complete. Please let me know down in the comment section what you guys thought of this build of Tindangles. Is it something you might try out? So, thank you again so much for watching. Ngā mihi for now, and good night.